what it is. Welcome to Planet Tyrus. And as I'm pulling you into my gravitation, today we're going to talk about, well, me. Well, actually, one of my favorite authors, which is, ironically, well, me. So right around the corner, literally days away, depending on when this drops, my new book, What It Is, America, is going to be out. And it's been a crazy trip to even describe myself as an author. With my first book, Just Tyrus, as it says, this is not the original copy because I had to put the New York Times bestseller label on there. But writing this was one of the most difficult challenges in my life. And even at one point, and I'll tell you when I bring my writing coach on, this almost did not happen. Literally tried to stop it from happening. And then it got good to me. And then we came out with Enough Said, which was kind of not really a continuation. The only thing I wish we would have done differently is the color schemes. I think people got confused because these sales stayed the same because I think they were buying the same book. Yes, there are a lot of similarities. I'm topless in both, but this one was more of a memoir, and this one was more of kind of like a memoir with how my mind works and my thought process, and then I kind of put it all together for What It Is, America, where we're a little more straightforward and calling it like it is, not how you want it to be. So, and I figured the way to do this and talk about my new book and what my thought process is would bring on my esteemed writing coach. He's the Alfred to my Batman, and Chris Epting. He's an accomplished writer of his own. We've been working together on all my books, so he's weathered a few storms with the creative process, and just to say the least, because I was originally rejected as an author. So it's always nice to look back when someone says no, and then you're here now where you're on your third project. You know, it's kind of, but before we get into it, just a little bit of background on you, Chris. Like, what is how did you get it so into writing? Was that always a lifetime passion?
Yeah, I was a kid. I literally was in like fourth grade, and a teacher called my parents and said, he likes writing, you should encourage this. And that, I love this teacher so much, I said that night, I want to be a writer. That's what I'm going to be. And there was a very well-known writer in our neighborhood in Westchester County in New York named John Cheever. My father said, you need to write him, ask his advice. I did. He became a mentor. And from that point on, that's been my path. I mean, there's always little barriers in the way, things you and I have talked about. Yeah. I wrote and directed commercials for years, but then eventually got around to becoming an author like I wanted to, and a storyteller. And then began writing. I write about history and all kinds of travel, baseball, things I love. But then I write memoir with people, and I coach people, and I'm like a writing coach and teacher. And that's how you and I connected about 5 years or so ago.
Yeah, time flies with Tyrus, apparently.
Yeah. And that first book, you know, what you referenced earlier, what we went through was really compelling. I mean, for me, as somebody who likes to coach and help people, I learned a lot working with you, because you had a lot to get through, and at first you didn't want to do it, and then you said, you know what, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it right, and you bought into this process.
Yeah, and then the results were there. Meltdown.
It's in the book.
I had a complete meltdown a week before the book was
coming out. You called me
and
said, how can we stop this? And I said, well, the books are made. Like, they're in warehouses.
It's too late, bro.
You said, there's no way to get out of this. And I remember saying to you, no, but this is a good thing. Because you were feeling anxiety. Like, what have I done? What are people going to learn about me now? And I remember saying to you, this is actually a really good sign, because if you weren't feeling that, it would mean that we didn't go far enough, that you should be sweating. Anybody who writes their story, anybody watching this, listening right now, if they're writing their story, it should give you anxiety, or you haven't shared enough. That's a good feeling.
Right, because if you're writing to make yourself look a certain perspective, like I'm the hero or I'm the victim in how I write, when you just put it out there, people are going to make their own decision.
People, writing
you're not
love
trying
letters to yourself is a whole
Yeah.
other kind of writing thing. And when you're vulnerable and you show people that not just that you've been through stuff, but that you got through it. I think with your first book, a lot of people realized if he can get through his stuff, I can get through mine. That was a big, if you look at all those tens of thousands of comments on Amazon, a lot of people really felt their own story come out, I think, when they read yours. And that's what I gave you so much credit for, was going deep. And I'll add that here now, third book, I mean, technically fourth with the children's book up.
Yeah, that's coming around the corner. Yeah, but I got to drag you in for a different podcast narratives.
I've never worked with anybody on more than one project, so I've had the benefit each time now of watching you go deeper and deeper. And our collaborative energy, I think, is really good. Where I can kind of hear you in a certain way and maybe make suggestions about things, and you're open to it because we've been through these wars.
Yeah, I'm coachable.
Well, you're an athlete, so you get the coaching relationship. One of my favorite, I have to tell you, this one to me, the new book is so much different than the other two because there's a lot of current events in it. But one of my favorite stories in it, it's 50 stories. It's a lot of great content. But near the end, you and I were talking one day about the Bad News Bears and modern sports, modern coaching. I think you and I were talking, you had just watched your son play a baseball game. And we were reflecting back on Bad News Bears, one of our favorite movies. And there's a chapter in here about how things have changed and why that movie was actually a great example of coaching, of team chemistry, of believing in people, even when they're failing. I mean, there's great learning in that. And I love the depth to which you went on that story. Because for any of us that grew up in the 70s, and that was like one of our favorite movies.
Right,
I was in Little League when that movie came out. So it was like we all went to see it. We thought, this is our life. I was on a team like that. And I think that's one of my favorite stories in the book because it's reflective and it's you watching your son. That's what inspired it, which is a nice family tie. It's more, this book is for the first time as well. You're talking about being a father in ways you haven't before. It's another big
I would describe it as brutally honest. You talked about writing a love letter to yourself, right? But sometimes when you're writing a Dear John letter to yourself, where you're just telling it like it is, I think that was the point where, because a lot of times people will say, oh, you're such a great dad, but you don't necessarily feel like a great dad because you're working in another state most of the time.
I was going to say, forget love letters. You were writing hate letters to yourself in some cases, putting a self-critical mirror on yourself, which then pushed you to get to the other side of how to be better, how to be stronger. And I think that's another great theme in the book too, is overcoming things about yourself that you want to fix, that we're all works in progress. And you get into that. Again, there's a lot of current events, but there's also a lot of self-reflection. And I think those moments for me, we'll talk about it. I mean, the way the book opens, I'm sure a lot of people watching remember last year's election cycle when Donald Trump was on Gutfeld and you gave him a belt. You had a specially prepared wrestling belt for him, which became one of those moments. It's funny. I watch it again and I can't think about it. I think of the first book that, just Tyrus, and this vulnerable kid, coming out of some real nitty gritty upbringing situations. And now there you sit with the,
breaking bread with the president. Yeah.
Mixing it up, like that, giving him this gift and having this moment. And like that arc right there is so crazy. I don't know how that feels for you, but when I read this stuff, I think, my God, there's really nothing else like this story.
I also thought it was important because I did talk about interacting and meeting the president. And I thought it was important to emphasize how undifficult it was to block out the noise, how genuine of a person that he is, that it's one of those things where you've heard, it's like first impressions are everything. And I think the one thing about the president is he has an amazing first impression where you will learn a lot about him. And I'm not talking about seeing him on TV, shaking his hand and like just meeting him, you kind of get a feeling. And when the first time I met him, just shaking his hand and the way he said hello, I'm like, this doesn't feel like Hitler. This doesn't feel like a guy who's like immediately telling his aides to wash his hand because a brother just touched it. You know what I'm saying? Because he was this race, it didn't feel that way, and then just being around him, I thought it was important to normalize what is something that's very unnormal, is meeting a president. that's something that you never in your lifetime think will happen. And not just meeting him, but seeing like, man, how they got it so wrong, or it was such a deliberate campaign to go against somebody because he never really fights it. And I talk about that a lot. Like, I'm confused by why he doesn't put up more of a fight. But then once you get to know him, you understand why he doesn't. And so, and I think I expressed that a lot in the book, to where I kind of pull myself back a lot when talking about meeting him and understanding how different, because we got I figured the 10 things that they said about him, 4 got to be right. You know what I mean? Like, you just law of averages when someone's describing someone, if someone's like, hey, this dude's this, he's this, and you meet him like, well, he wasn't as bad as that guy, but he definitely does talk a lot, or whatever the rumor is. Of course, with the president, they were all social deviant qualities, to where, like, if he had even a quarter of what he's accused of having, I think he'd be in a straitjacket somewhere. But it's just,
well, the other thing too, when you write about in this beginning of the book, is how he was with your family, and that I thought was a revelation too, because you watched him relate to your daughter in a way that was like a grandfather. I think you write in the book, and that element that you don't see a lot. But the other thing too, and again, it's a great way to kick the book off. But you're around a lot of people, a lot of politicians. They all come, they pass through on the show wherever you happen to be. You also make a point that he was no different behind the scenes than he was on camera, right?
No, that's the thing. The camera was off. He was the same guy. And people who aren't in entertainment or aren't even around that, but you still see it. If you see your friend's portrayal of their life on social media, it's very different than their life at home. Everything's great and they have filters and everything's wonderful, but they could have a broken marriage at home. You don't know. You just know what's presented in front of the thing. Well, the entertainment world or the political world, it's the same thing. It's just magnified hundreds of thousands. So when you are on camera, you have to be a certain way. And usually those who are the ones who are full of shit, that's a hard thing to maintain, is that presence of the bullshit persona that they're putting, that I care about every man and, whatever. As soon as that camera's off, it's a release. And that's when you always see the personalities come out, where that's where the guy who's on TV saying he loves orphans, the camera goes off. He's like, get those kids away from me. They're disgusting. That's what I was expecting to see with the president. I was expecting to see that he has this amazing ability to put it on in front of the camera. And then as soon as the camera goes off, then we'll see the real President Trump. And there was no difference. And that, for me, as a guy who carries himself the same way, that spoke volumes to me, because I was like, there is no release. When people are full of shit on TV, there's a release when that camera's off. It's just a thing.
Well, I was thinking about that too when you first were telling me about this, that it was going to kick the book off. And it's like, I was trying to think of somebody who's been on camera more than him just in modern life. And I don't really think there is anybody who is constantly, whether it's television shows or
he's on a 24-hour cycle. That'd be an actually interesting game to play, is if you could start from zero in your remote, change the channel, and you have to give it 20 seconds and go through every channel and see if you could make it without hearing President Trump's name. I don't think you could.
It's been that way for those of us that grew up in New York, like in the 70s and 80s. He was always out there, always doing something that was present where there were cameras present. And he seems to have adopted this weird thing where it is seamless. He's just himself, because it's probably just easier to be yourself.
When can he not be?
Yeah,
that's what I try to show in the book, is that he doesn't have the ability to camouflage anymore, because there is no downtime. I mean, absolutely none. There's no place for him to let his hair down, so to speak. Because,
and then and how does it happen that he writes the foreword? I mean, he doesn't do that a lot, and yet he wrote a glowing foreword. I mean, how did that happen?
Well, that's the crazy. I always thought, again, I'm not a journalist, but I try to have integrity, and I discussed it with you, and you thought it was a good idea that we send a copy to the president's team, because we reference him so much, just out of respect. That's what you're supposed to do, And but I've never bashed anyone, or I don't believe in cheap shots and talking about shit that's none of my business. But you want them to know that you're mentioning them. I just think it's a common courtesy. Then it was like, great, thanks. We'll let him know. We'll get it to him. And then it was literally, hey, the president loves it and he wants to write the foreword to your book. And you're like, yeah, okay, sure, yeah, great. And then you're like, holy shit, the president of the United States is writing the foreword to my book. And because of the way today is, that would normally have been a front page news thing. Like that would have been, the president of the United States takes time out of his busy schedule. Like it would be something they're like, wow, and he was doing it for a black man. Again, very non-Hitler-esque of him to do this for a guy that doesn't even have his own show. So, you know what I'm saying? There was no upside. It's not like he was going to get a big push on the Tyrus Tonight Show.
And you read the foreword, and it's very much in his voice. I mean, it's it's
in
him.
caps. I would not let them touch one thing on that. Do not let it at all, because it's like a letter from the president. Like, yes, I shared that with the book, but that's something that original note will be in a frame, and then one day my grandkids will say, like, why? What is that? And I'm like, I interviewed the president, and he wrote a foreword to my book. Like, they won't understand all the BS and the media crap, because that will all die away. You'll just see this historic moment where I can stick my chest out and be like, yes, I once impressed the president. It's a thing where it's on your resume. I think over time it becomes more valuable and more precious. It's a rose that you don't smell right away. You got to it's got to sink in. There's got to be some time between, I think.
Look, whatever anybody thinks of the president, I think they've got to give you that tip of the hat where it's the president of the United States. And I mean, Look, another thing, the book opens up as we were working on it. It was when there was the sad news about Joe Biden's health and the cancer diagnosis. And the book actually begins. Look, you go at the Biden administration fairly hard, I think objectively, but there's a note up front that says, this tragic news came down, and that that everybody should keep him and his family,
right, yeah, but that doesn't excuse. Having said that, basically,
I'm still going to hold him accountable.
Yeah, because.
But there is this thing we live in today where there's, and both sides do it to some degree. I think one does it more than the other. Where when there's bad news about somebody, there's like this grave dancing. Obviously, saw it a lot with Charlie Kirk, which was awful in my opinion, where people celebrate things. There used to be a time where that never existed on any level.
The addiction of attention is maybe a whole book within itself.
But it was classy to acknowledge that, look, he's still a man with a family, and you've got to have good thoughts for that. But you still have to hold people accountable for,
Right, because I think also I was probably the first to go after the administration. I kept saying that he was not fit, that he, and at one point I even said I no longer want to make jokes about the president, because I feel like it's unfair in the sense that he's afflicted. It's his family that's putting him out there.
Well, you go into that pretty hard too. And I was going to say, now we're in the season of books about last year's election. It started basically with Jake Tapper's book. Yeah, you've had Kamala Harris's book and a number of others. I think Jonathan Carl, just has one out. So everyone, this is the season, and you've got a lot in the book about that. But yours, I was thinking about this, is the only one told from outside a bubble. Those other books, it's within a political bubble, it's within a media bubble. Yours is really from the standpoint, as you travel in the country, doing your big sold-out one-man shows, you're meeting a lot of people, a lot of Americans in pockets around the country that don't normally get a lot of attention. Right. People look at your routing. It's small-town America in most cases. And so you're coming at it from a standpoint, not being in a bubble, but just being out amongst the people, which is a way different point of view. And that's, I think, in this, with all these books out right now, talking about all the hand-wringing about the election, yours is unique, I think, because it's based on real on-the-ground sort of reporting.
Right, because I even talk about calling the election early. Like, there was just...
Big viral moment for you.
Yeah, I don't know what TV was telling you, but nowhere that I had been in the country, anywhere had I seen anyone all in on Kamala. If anything, it was they would still complain about President Trump. And their argument was, well, I won't vote then. I don't think, like, I just never was in a situation where I was traveling all over the country. And I mean, I'm a Holiday Inn guy and a Waffle House guy, get my egg whites or whatever. So it's like, we're not out there, doing 5-star dinners across the country. We're just rolling in and out of our towns, making towns, as we like to say in wrestling. But everywhere I went, there was not one area where I was like, wow, this is really pro Kamala, or this is really pro, it was just kind of, it was either pro Trump or I don't like Trump. There was just, she was almost an afterthought. And I was like, the media is pushing it. And then, the media also, and again, this is probably the closest you'll ever get me into conspiracy theories is this book. But I feel like they're common sense questions, not conspiracy theories. It's not, it's not like wild thing about how many guys are on the grassy knoll, because it looks like it was the driver. But, which is crazy. How did we not see that? I mean, he just turned over, like no one saw that? Like, what, man, optical illusions. But to that point, we're trying to keep it as real as possible, but at the same time, tell the story from a perspective that we're not going to get a job at the end of the book. Like, it's just, you might not, because it's not President Trump, everything he does is wonderful. It's not that kind of a book, and when I don't like something or I don't agree with something, I never saw a situation where I needed to just go with the flow. And I would argue, after spending some time with the president, that he's not a big fan of the go with the flow guy either. He'd rather have a guy, someone who has challenging ideas or brings something to the table than someone going, oh yeah, yes sir, yes sir. I mean, after a while, what's the point of having somebody around who just backs up what you say? They're not really bringing anything to the table.
Yes, man. And again, I think your book is really objective, and I think that's what makes it interesting, given all the other books that are out there right now, is that you're coming at it from an experience that has not been represented, and that really is kind of, in Latin they call it vox populi, the voice of the people, really being out there. And for people that have seen your shows, you mix it up with people. You get to know people in those moments, and you blow into town and meet a bunch of people, and you soak up, those attitudes and opinions, and a lot of that. And the book ends, actually, I love, it's like a bookend. The book opens with giving the belt to the president,
right, but
it ends with this sort of poetic view of the belts that make up America, the Rust Belt and the pretzel belt, all these different belts. When you fly and you look over middle America, all the plains and those great, you see the squares and the circles just out there when you're flying. And it ties up this idea that we are a country of belts, of different people in different regions that all kind of need to work together, and I think that's the redemptive part of it. But get on the book for a second, for all the political stuff in it, for me, it's the human stories that resonate, and every book you've done has got a couple of those that are super personal. And you called One Night, people that know you know that you tend to an incredible array of aquatic creatures,
right,
of turtles and fish and eels and all these things. And one night you called, and if you don't mind me sharing, in a ton of pain, because one of your favorite fish was going into death throes. He was 13 years old, so he is one of my very first. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you called, and it's like, I'm listening to you, and I'm like, this is one of your best friends. Obviously, you've watched this fish because you connect with these fish and these creatures, and you've watched him do all these things that were relatable to you because of what he had been through as a male fish, right?
That's right. Yeah. Set up his territory.
And I'm like, we have to capture this because we know the end is near here, and the loss is going to be profound. Let's write about it. This is a good thing to write about, and you do, and it's like, it's a really powerful story of the relationship with a female. I don't want to give too much away.
Yeah.
But this moment at the end is most people I know that have read it already are in tears at the end of it because they all relate. Everyone's got one of these relationships,
right?
Where a dog or a person or whatever, you feel that connection
because of some of the observations broke the rules of typically what fish pair up for life in some cases, seasons in others, or they pair up until a bird comes along. But when a pair has been together for a really long time, and in this case, he had been paired up with his mate for like came in together, so they had been 13 years basically.
I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Fitch.
And yeah, and so I showed you videos of I don't know how many fry. They probably had 100,000 babies in their lifetime that are all over the country. But
well, you were that was the other part too. Visually, you'd send me a little video of what was happening and what she was doing to help him and be there for him. And I was watching this thinking, this is one of those stories that we have to capture. We really do, because in a book like this, that's about things that deeply affect you. It's not like there's the political stuff, which is fine and interesting, and people will chew that over.
Yeah, a whole book about politics is boring to me. Like I think politics affect more of our life than we probably should let it. But I think we have to talk about it as it is part of our life now. Like it's no longer an asterisk where it's like, whoa, I don't talk politics. It's a lot of cases. Unfortunately, it's an identity now.
It's like the playoffs are going on all the time.
Yeah, and I have my Patriot paint on, and there's no halftime. It's like it's just revved up, and you're losing yourself because you're taking up a fight that really doesn't need to be taken up. And I talk about in the book is like most of us who aren't in front of the camera or trying to be in front of the camera don't live our lives that way. They don't stick their head out when they meet a neighbor. How'd you vote before we shake hands? Like those are things that you just didn't care about. You cared about the character of the person. I don't care how you vote. Are you a good person? Can you barbecue? Like there's important things that you get to know people. Like you're going to possibly not have a great lifetime relationship with a neighbor because every 4 years they vote a little different than you do.
This litmus test. The litmus test thing is weird, and it was never like that 20, 30 years ago. It's definitely changed.
It's like a hyper sense of stupidity, and and that's not party specific. It's just this, where this all diehard, and it's more magnified on the extreme left because they're in such a low power position that they're desperate and but you also see it on the right with the extremism or the absolutism or someone who's different than them. I
mean, the thing we mentioned with Charlie Kirk, I was like a lot of people very appalled at the glee some people felt. But like the other day, in terms of the timing, whenever people watched us, when former Vice President Dick Cheney passed away, and I saw comments about Liz Cheney, and it's like, come on, really? I mean, it's just somebody passes away. Just respect that. If you have nothing positive, just shut up. It's just ridiculous.
And it's that comet, that thrill, or whatever it is that they think they've shocked the world. The stock market dropped 2 points because you threw shade on a man who lived whether you liked him or not, a powerful, successful life. He had a powerful, successful family. You don't have to agree with their political stances to say, sorry for your loss and
rest in peace. Yeah,
rest
it's
in
really
peace.
simple to
this
do.
idea that somehow calling I always said it always says more about them.
Absolutely.
To where the only time you could muster the courage to talk shit about somebody is when they're gone. You can't be any more bigger coward than that. A man has passed, and now you have the microphone. And so that's why I always say the same thing, and you've heard me say this. I know what you cheer for. Your boos give me self-esteem. And so people say things and they go after you. And the worst thing is when you turn it back around them. And that's one of the things, and this was actually your brainstorm, was because I was like tired of the Hitler stuff. And like, let's just define what Hitler was. Let's just have a whole two chapters to actually explain, in case those who missed the memo, on what he was and how far, miles upon miles, atmospheres that President Trump or the Republican Party or anyone is remotely close to this dude. Like it's really, the tragedy is watering down one of the most destructive, dangerous periods of our history.
Yeah, it's a catchphrase now.
That should be an asterisk to where we should all understand that history to a T to ensure it doesn't happen again. Not use it because you can't win an election. Like, to me,
you can hate the president, you can be hypercritical, but to take the Hitler model and drop that grid on. Yeah, I think most people that know anything about history know that's preposterous, but it's become a thing, it's become a deeply embraced thing. And you write, again, there's not one but two chapters. It's like it needed to be hit twice in this book.
Yeah,
How out of control it's gone.
Because what it is the accountability of your words and actions are not present anymore because you do it in a little camera and you post it. You're not going to walk up to a group of people who disagree with you and fire off that stuff that they do, because there might be real life consequences. You might get your ass kicked, or you might lose the argument. They might be like, "Oh, is that it?" So they do it, they post it. That's the thrill. Ha, I told you. And then when they get the comments back, if they don't like it, what do? They block it. So it's literally, it's the most cowardly thing a person can do. Somebody passes, and then all of a sudden you got all this shit to say. Like, oh yeah, how convenient. How convenient. Yeah, now you can talk about him because you can't rebut. And most of you, when I do, and it was situations when a person of merit or fame or accomplishment dies, it's always the ones who aren't doing shit that have so much to say. You never hear, like it's always people who have accomplished little or nothing because they spend so much time watching everybody else. But I guess that's why they have so much to say, because they're an observer. And I do talk about it's. I think it's better to know less of what's on TV and more what's going on in your world.
Yeah, no, it's in the book. There's another thing in the book that we talked about a lot that with the first two books you didn't want to do specifically, but something changed this time, and that's writing about fatherhood.
Yeah.
What made? Because I still wonder, like, why did you finally decide that this was worth writing about in a way that's really personal? Because you take. When you talk about kind of owning your behavior, you go into that in this chapter.
Yeah, I'm not. I'm definitely not writing a love letter to myself, and I think a lot of times, because when you do things the non-traditional, that wasn't the plan. The plan is, for most of us, is you married one person and you have a family. And then, and the kids leave the nest and you grow old together, and then hopefully you go before she does, because, you won't be able to do anything without her when she's gone. And I mean, that's the plan. Like, that's the American plan. You retire, you raise when things in life happen that are not the plan, like getting 3 women pregnant in a year, you have to accept it, which is not an easy thing to do. Then you have to. No, accepting and owning are two different things, and you got to own it, and you have to be able to not talk about it in shame format, because the result of that is you have 3 beautiful children. So you have to now change what is a bar joke, basically, into a mentally meaningful part in your life, to where you can convey to your children, that they were not a mistake or whatever. There's a way you have to show that they matter. Originally, when I wrote the other books, my children were too young, I think, I didn't want to discuss it. The other thing too is privacy. I don't, it's not something that I wanted my kids picked and poked at by people who connect us. That's why, people don't have a connection to where my kids live and things like that, and names and last names, and because that's personal. And not all my kids like TV, or the fact that, their dad's on TV and they want to have normal lives, and they don't want people in their business, and they don't want people coming up to them saying, "Hey, did your dad do this? And did your dad, or I heard this or that." So that was always my concern, was that I didn't want a stranger on the street discussing my children's lives with them, because I always said, it'll be up to them when I tell the story, because it's their story. And if they don't want me to tell that story, I'm not going to. I also understand, and I talk about, there will be consequences. There will be anger. And I think one of the things I talk about as a dad is nobody said it came with smiles and bells and awards. It's a responsibility. It's a duty. It's not the accoutrement of the other stuff is irrelevant. It doesn't matter if you like the mom. It doesn't matter if she's unreasonable. You got to eat it, because that's what a father does. So I'm highly critical in the sense, but it's also like a pep talk. I felt in a lot of ways, like it's not going to be easy. You're going to have to make tough decisions. There are things that you have to sacrifice.
It's a brutally honest chapter. It really is. It's again, it's one of those things where I don't imagine you could have done that in one of the first two books. And it's this evidence that the more you do this, the deeper you're going. And on that note, I mean, when your first book, I would argue now, several years later, you're a lot more well known. You've been out there in the public, and there's a chapter in there about the waning effect of celebrity on politics. Talk about that a little, because that was, in the last election cycle, there were a lot of celebrities stepping up that didn't really appear. There was a time where that would have made a big difference, I think.
It would have.
But it doesn't anymore. What do you think
anymore
happened where celebrities don't connect on that level anymore?
Well, because they're not celebrities anymore. Like, it's not the same thing. It was movie stars that spoke when John Wayne spoke, because there was only one John Wayne. Celebrities, they overplayed their hand. Once they got political, they got normal. You're not, if back in the day, if Dean Martin came out and said, I support Ronald Reagan, people would be like, wow, because it was unheard of.
It was Frank Sinatra and JFK.
Yeah, it was. It was just these bigger than life personas. Social media has watered down the celebrity status. People will know who an influencer is more than necessarily who their favorite actress is in a Harry Potter flick, or like the allure has gone. Now the older generation of celebrities, they seem to think they still have that, where they can come out and say, vote this way. The problem is that everyday Americans see how you live your life. They see all the things you have. It's not like before where it was like very protected. You just knew they lived in Hollywood Hills. You had fantasies about their lives. I mean, they were able to look, Rock Hudson, Liberace, they were able to live these completely different lives than what you saw in front of the camera, because there was a level of protection and mystery. That's all gone. So when a celebrity comes out and makes these, we got to do this, and the average person looks at them like, wait a minute, you have a security force, you live in a gated mansion, you have a mansion, two of them, you have FU money, and you're telling me how to vote. And it's not even with a reason. It's almost an attack. If you don't vote, don't watch my movies. And I think I think there's a lot of actors that overplayed their hand.
Yeah, and musicians and other celebrities.
And once they cross that line, and once you pick the team, you got nowhere to go when it's over.
Well, you split your audience for one thing too. I mean,
and then eventually it's going to change, and then you can't go back. I think we're seeing a lot of that now. That people are trying to go back. Celebs who picked a side, and now they're trying to go back, and it's not an easy. It's because you're a hypocrite.
There's a chapter in here called Silver Foxes and the Wisdom of Experience. I spoke to a group yesterday about a few things, and your name came up talking about this new book. And it was an older group it was a women's group. And, you write in the book about when you're on the road, you do have this kind of core audience. It's a little bit older, wiser, mature. And there's a really nice chapter in the book about what you learn, the advice you get from sort of the older set when you go out. Has that been an unusual connection for you?
Yeah, that's.
You ever think that would be like a sweet spot audience?
No.
Because you see elderly people wearing the gold chains at the shows.
Well, here's the thing: the more I think about it, they're not that much elderly. The older I get, they're more peers. I think not everyone ages as graciously as I have, but. The older, I call them silver foxes as a term of affection because they are very affectionate and positive when they see me. It's always, hey, Tyrus, I love you doing the show. They'll ask for a hug or a picture. So, and they're very cheerful and positive. So it's like they're almost like you're a rock star and they're still cheering for you. It's a weird it's a very different thing. It's a very positive thing, and it's cute.
There
And
was a lady yesterday.
weird
She was
to me,
80
but
No, the
it's
lady
at the same
yesterday,
time.
85 years old, and she
And
was saying to me, I've never heard common sense from anybody. I love Tyrus. I would give Tyrus a big hug if he was here right now.
yeah, I get that a lot, and it cracks me up because they never say like, "Hey, man, you're fucking brilliant." Like what you said the other day, wow, mind blown. It's like you just make sense. You're talking away, you make sense. It's like it's the greatest C compliment ever, but it's something that we're like, you say something and it makes sense to me. So it's not sexy. I'm not like, they're not going to say I'm giving Peterson a run for his money with profound statements, but they're like, if he does say something, I'll turn to Tyrus and say, what does it mean? So like, that's kind of what I've become, an interpreter, so to speak, of just plain talk.
But I was going to say, the cliche, though, of common sense not being common anymore, with you, it becomes a big deal. That becomes like your currency because people crave common sense. At the end of it all, in the world that is really kind of off the rails right now, a little common sense goes a long way. And I think that's why in this book, getting back to the new book, it's like it's every page there's common sense. Whether you agree or not, it's still sensible thinking. It's fair-minded. It's do your job, be accountable. I mean, again, there's a thing in there on term limits. I think one of my favorite chapters. It's not about right or left. It's about old and young, and what people need to start thinking about in terms of anybody's capacity in their late 70s or 80s or whatever. And it's just something as a nation we should really think about where's the young blood. It's like the old athlete that refuses to retire and give up that slot for the next generation. I know you get used to this stuff. You like the perks, you like all that. But at a certain point, if you don't start thinking about what's behind
someone should be able to say, hey, it happens in sports. Manager puts his hand on your shoulder and says, I need the ball, kid. Like, I appreciate, this is it. And we need that desperately in politics. I think it would clean it up too. I think if you couldn't have a career there, I don't think we'd see the level of corruption because it would be, you don't have time. And it would attract people there to do a service, not serve themselves. I think, and we discussed that a lot in the book. I know.
I have a favor to ask you before we wrap up. Is I teach a lot of memoir writing classes to people watching right now. You've been through this probably 3 times now, and I think there's still more to come, and you dig deeper and deeper and deeper. What advice do you give to somebody watching right now, thinking about writing their story, thinking about maybe putting pen to paper to document their life and make sense of it? Given what you've been through now with me these last 5 years, what do you say to people about what the experience is like and hopefully why you think they should do it?
Well, the first thing, if you can, get a writing coach, take a writing class. No, I'm serious.
It's kindred spirits are good. Yeah.
Yeah. Surround yourself with people who are thinking that way or open thinkers, because writing a book is not something that you just start writing chapter 1 and you kind of go from there. So you have to, I think, write down whatever your thoughts are. Like, just, if I'm going to write a book, write 10 things down a day that you're going to do. Even if you don't do any of them. But it's just the process of just writing down your thoughts. And then don't try to chronologically tell your story. Tell your story in the moment. If it hits you, a memory hits you, you smell a blueberry muffin reminds you of something, and you write it down, you had a fight, or whatever it is, just be in the moment with your pencil. And it doesn't matter if you write it down, you type it, just all your thoughts together, and then organize your thoughts once they're down, because there's nothing worse than having an epiphany or an idea and be like, well, wait, hold on, I got to get there first. And then you lose it in the moment. So it's a lot of times, if I have something hit me profound, I would write it down immediately, and I would send it to Chris, and then Chris would be like, all right, well, we'll find to put this somewhere. Like, we'll figure out a way to meld this. It's like you're taking giant pieces of gold and you're trying to mold into this belt, okay? But when you get a piece, you got to mold it. You can't hold on to it because you'll
even
lose
if you
it.
don't know where it goes yet.
Yeah, and sometimes it might not fit, but it's just the process.
Not, but at least you'll try and figure it out later. You can figure it out later.
But you definitely need to just write. Just write. It doesn't matter. Just get it off your chest, memoir or diary or whatever. Just get ideas off. Use your little notes on your phone. You have a funny thought or something crosses your mind, write it down, put it down there, because if you do that enough, you'll be in a situation one day where you're like, I've got 6 chapters of thoughts here. And all of a sudden it was just like a puzzle. It just kind of molds into a story.
Look at you, man. You're going to be teaching and coaching yourself.
Yeah, good luck. The last thing I need is another job. But hey, man, I appreciate our time today. Hey, and if someone is looking to take, and I'm telling you, I'm not an easy guy to work with. And this dude has enough patience to keep working with me. But I have attended his classes. They are very fun, different. If anything else, you hear some really cool ideas and expressions, and it's a lot of fun. So if someone was looking to take one of your classes or get more information, where going to find you, Chris?
They can go to chrisepting.com and they can write me directly off of that. I do online things and in-person things in Southern California where I live and all. So there's lots of ways to get to it. And it's always good to hear from people that are ready to embark on these kinds of journeys, these storytelling journeys, which whether you get published or not, it almost doesn't matter. It's just the exercise of doing it. I think it's healthy.
I think it's good for your soul. I think it's your mental health too. A lot of times when you can put experiences down on a piece of paper, it's a good way to close a chapter or understand it better.
Absolutely.
So, all right, man.
Congratulations, man. We did it again.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Yeah, that's right. November 11th. If it's already past November 11th, you better have had it already. But yeah, thank you, man. Again, forward by the president. And I'm very excited. And this time I'm in color, which is always nice. But
I'm looking forward to the next one, man.
Yes, sir. Till next time.